The music was still playing when they found her car. The radio dial was stuck on 102.7 FM, the same station that had been counting down the biggest hits of 1980 all night long. The keys dangled from the ignition, the driver's door hung open like a question mark against the October darkness, and 17-year-old Sarah Chen was nowhere to be found. That was October 31st, 1980. Halloween night, the night everything changed in the small town of Millbrook. Some stories begin with endings. This one starts with a disappearance that would haunt a community for decades, leaving behind more questions than answers, and enough guilt to fill Lake Millbrook twice over. Sarah Chen was supposed to be home by midnight. She never made it past 11:17 p.m. What happened in those missing hours would become the town's darkest secret, a mystery that would consume families, destroy friendships, and prove that sometimes the people we think we know best are the ones capable of the most shocking betrayals. The problem with Sarah Chen's disappearance wasn't that there were no clues. It was that there were too many, each one pointing in a different direction like a broken compass spinning wildly in a storm. Sarah was the golden girl of Millbrook High School's class of 1981. Valedictorian track, debate team captain, early admission. To Stanford University, she had everything going for her and everything to live for, which made her vanishing all the more inexplicable. On that Halloween night, Sarah had been at the Autumn Harvest Dance, the biggest social event of the school year. The gymnasium had been transformed into a haunted wonderland, complete with fake spiderwebs, carved pumpkins, and teenagers dressed as everything from vampires to punk rockers. Sarah had gone as Olivia Newton-John from Grease, complete with the tight black pants and red lipstick that made every boy in school stare, and every girl secretly jealous. She'd been seen talking to at least a dozen different people throughout the night. Her best friend, Jennifer Walsh, remembered seeing her by the punch bowl at 10:30. Her boyfriend, Tommy Martinez, had danced with her to Another Brick in the Wall at 10:45. Mrs. Henderson, the English teacher chaperoning the dance, clearly recalled Sarah asking for permission to leave early at 11 p.m. sharp. "I have to get home," Sarah had told Mrs. Henderson. "My parents are expecting me." But here's where the story gets complicated. Sarah's parents, Dr. Michael Chen and his wife Linda, were in San Francisco that weekend, attending a medical conference. They weren't expecting Sarah home at all. She was supposed to be staying with the Walshes, her best friend's family, just like she had dozens of times before. So why did Sarah lie to Mrs. Henderson? Where was she really going when she left that dance? And what happened to her in the 17 minutes between leaving the school parking lot and her car being discovered on the side of Mill Creek Road, 3 miles away, with the engine still running and her purse still on the passenger seat? The police arrived at 11:34 p.m., responding to a call from old Pete Morgan, who lived in the farmhouse at the end of Mill Creek Road. Pete had been letting his dog out for the night when he saw the headlights cutting through the darkness, sitting, stationary where no car should be. When he walked down to investigate, he found Sarah's powder blue 1978 Honda Civic, engine humming, radio playing, door ajar, and no sign of the girl who'd been driving it. Inside the car, everything seemed normal, at first glance. Sarah's purse contained her wallet with $43, her driver's license, her Stanford acceptance letter, which she carried everywhere like a talisman, and a small notebook filled with her careful handwriting. But it was what wasn't in the car that bothered investigators. Sarah's jacket was missing despite the fact that it was a cold October night and she'd been wearing it at the dance. Her car keys were in the ignition, but her house keys were gone from the keychain. And most puzzling of all, there was a single red rose on the dashboard, fresh, expensive, and definitely not there when she'd driven to the dance earlier that evening. The investigation into Sarah Chen's disappearance revealed layers of secrets beneath Millbrook's picture-perfect surface, like peeling back wallpaper to discover the rot underneath. Detective Ray Coleman, a 20-year veteran of the county sheriff's department, had seen his share of missing persons cases, runaways usually, kids who couldn't handle the pressure, or who'd gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd. But Sarah didn't fit the profile. She was too responsible, too focused on her future, too connected to her community to just walk away. The first theory centered on Tommy Martinez, Sarah's boyfriend of 8 months. Tommy was handsome in that dangerous way that made parents nervous. Leather jacket, motorcycle, the kind of smile that could charm its way out of detention or into serious trouble. He'd been acting strange all week leading up to the dance, according to Sarah's friends. Distant, moody, and he'd left the dance only 15 minutes after Sarah, claiming he wasn't feeling well. When Detective Coleman questioned Tommy, the boy's story kept changing. First, he said he'd gone straight home after the dance. Then he admitted he'd driven around for a while trying to clear his head. Finally, under pressure, he broke down and confessed he'd followed Sarah when she left the school. I was worried about her, Tommy said, his hands shaking as he lit another cigarette in the interview room. She'd been acting weird all week, like she was scared of something. She kept looking over her shoulder, jumping every time someone came up behind her. I thought maybe she was in some kind of trouble. Tommy's story was that he'd followed Sarah's car down Main Street, keeping his distance so she wouldn't notice. But when she turned onto Mill Creek Road instead of heading toward the Walsh house where she was supposed to be staying, he'd gotten confused and decided to hang back. By the time he worked up the courage to follow, he said, her car was already sitting empty by the side of the road. I panicked, Tommy admitted. I thought maybe she'd seen me following her and gotten mad, maybe walked off into the woods to cool down. I called her name a few times, but when she didn't answer, I got scared and left. I know I should have called the police right then, but I was afraid they'd think I'd done something to her. Detective Coleman wanted to believe Tommy's story, but there were problems with it. For one thing, Tommy's motorcycle had been spotted at the Moonlight Diner on Route 9 at 11:20 p.m., just 3 minutes after Sarah's car was discovered. The diner was in the opposite direction from Mill Creek Road. For Tommy to have been at both places within that time frame, he would have had to be driving like a maniac, or lying about where he'd been. The second theory involved Sarah's family. Despite their picture-perfect image, the Chens were dealing with their own problems. Dr. Chen's medical practice was struggling financially, and there were rumors he'd been borrowing money from some questionable sources. Linda Chen had been seen arguing with Sarah in the school parking lot just days before the disappearance, a heated conversation that ended with Sarah storming off in tears. When questioned, Linda Chen broke down completely. Sarah found out about the money, she sobbed. She found some papers in Michael's study, saw how much debt we were in. She was furious with us for lying to her, for not telling her we might not be able to afford Stanford after all. She said she didn't want to be part of a family of liars anymore. But the most disturbing theory didn't emerge until 3 days after Sarah's disappearance, when Jennifer Walsh finally worked up the courage to tell police what Sarah had confided in her. The week before the dance, Sarah said someone had been following her. Jennifer whispered, her eyes red from crying. Not Tommy, someone else. Someone she didn't recognize. She'd noticed the same car behind her several times, different places, different times of day. A dark sedan with tinted windows. She'd started changing her route home from school, started looking over her shoulder all the time. She was scared, but she didn't want to worry her parents because they already had so much going on. Jennifer's revelation cast Sarah's disappearance in an entirely different light. Suddenly, this wasn't about teenage drama or family problems. This was about predation, about someone who had been watching Sarah, learning her patterns, waiting for the right moment to strike. The breakthrough in Sarah Chen's case came from an unexpected source, a roll of film found in her bedroom 3 weeks after she disappeared. Sarah had been an avid photographer, always carrying her camera to school events, football games, and social gatherings. Her room was filled with photo albums documenting her high school years, but this particular roll of film had been hidden in a jewelry box, undeveloped and forgotten until her parents were going through her belongings. When the film was developed, most of the photos were typical teenage snapshots, friends making silly faces, pictures of her dog, landscape shots of Millbrook's autumn foliage. But the last 3 photos on the roll were different. They were taken through her bedroom window looking down at the street, and they showed the same dark sedan Jennifer had mentioned. The car was parked across from the Chen house, and while the license plate wasn't clearly visible, there was something else that made Detective Coleman's blood run cold. In the driver's seat, barely visible through the windshield, was a figure, And on the dashboard of the car, clearly visible in Sarah's photographs, was a small bouquet of red roses, the same type of rose that had been found in Sarah's car the night she disappeared. Detective Coleman had the photos enhanced by the state crime lab, but the results only deepened the mystery. The figure in the car was too shadowy to identify, and the license plate remained illegible. However, the forensics team was able to determine that the photos had been taken on October 28th, just 3 days before Sarah's disappearance. Armed. With this new evidence, Coleman began canvassing the neighborhood more thoroughly. He discovered that Mrs. Dorothy Patterson, an elderly widow who lived 2 houses down from the Chens, had noticed the same dark sedan parked on their street multiple times over the past month. "I thought it was odd," Mrs. Patterson told Coleman. "We don't get many strangers in this neighborhood, and this car would just sit there for hours. Sometimes I'd see it in the morning when I was watering my plants, and it would still be there when I went to bed. But whenever I tried to get a good look at whoever was inside, they'd drive away." The investigation took on new urgency. Sarah hadn't simply disappeared. She'd been stalked, hunted, and ultimately taken by someone who had been planning her abduction for weeks. But who? And why Sarah specifically? The answer came from an unlikely source. Sarah's own diary. Discovered, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her closet. The diary revealed that Sarah had been receiving anonymous letters for the past 2 months. Love letters, written in careful block print, declaring the writer's obsession with her beauty, her intelligence, her perfection. "My dearest Sarah," one entry quoted from the letters, "you are everything that is pure and good in this world. Watching you is like watching an angel walk among mortals. Soon we will be together forever, away from all the ugly people who don't deserve to breathe the same air as you." The letters had started romantic but had gradually become more disturbing, more possessive. The final letter, received just 2 days before Halloween, had contained a threat. "If I can't have you, no one can. The roses I leave for you are symbols of my devotion. When you see them, know that I am near. Soon, very soon, you will come with me willingly, or you will come with me anyway." Sarah had been living in terror, too frightened to tell anyone about the letters, but too scared to ignore them. She'd started carrying her camera everywhere, hoping to catch her stalker in the act. She'd been planning her own investigation, her own trap. Instead, she had walked into his. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected confession, 23 years after Sarah Chen's disappearance. In 2003, a man named Robert Henley was arrested in Nevada for the attempted kidnapping of a college student. During questioning, Henley, now dying of cancer and facing life in prison, asked to speak with Detective Coleman, who had long since retired but remained haunted by Sarah's case. "I want to tell you about the girl in Millbrook," Henley said during their meeting at the Nevada State Prison. "The Chinese girl with the pretty smile. I've been carrying this for over 20 years and I'm tired of the wait." Robert Henley had been a traveling salesman in 1980, selling medical equipment to small-town doctors across the Midwest. He'd visited Dr. Chen's practice several times that summer and had become obsessed with Sarah after seeing her photograph on her father's desk. "She was perfect," Henley said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Too perfect for that little town, too perfect for those ordinary people. I started making excuses to come back to Millbrook just to see her. I'd park outside the school, outside her house, outside wherever she was going to be. I knew her schedule better than she did." Henley admitted to writing the anonymous letters, to leaving roses in places where Sarah would find them, to following her car that Halloween night. But what happened next shattered everything Detective Coleman thought he knew about the case. "She saw me following her," Henley continued. "Instead of being scared, she got angry. She pulled over on that back road and got out of her car, marched right up to my window. 'What do you want?' she demanded. 'Why are you following me?' She was fearless even then. Most girls would have driven away, called for help. But not Sarah. She wanted answers." According to Henley, Sarah had threatened to call the police unless he explained himself. In a moment of panic, he'd gotten out of his car, intending only to calm her down, to explain that he wasn't going to hurt her. But Sarah had started screaming, fighting, trying to run back to her car. I just wanted her to be quiet, Henley said. I put my hand over her mouth, tried to calm her down, but she kept struggling, kept fighting. And then, he paused, his voice breaking for the first time. And then she went limp. I'd pressed too hard. I'd held on too long. She was gone. The rest of Henley's confession was a catalogue of horror and cowardice. He'd panicked, driven Sarah's body deep into the national forest and buried her in a place he claimed he could never find again. He'd wiped down her car, left the rose as a final gesture, and fled town that same night. I never meant to kill her, Henley insisted. I just wanted to talk to her to make her understand how much I loved her. But I was weak, and I was scared, and I ruined everything. Detective Coleman listened to the confession with a mixture of relief and rage. After 23 years, he finally had answers. But the answers came too late for Sarah's parents, who had both died still not knowing what happened to their daughter. Too late for Tommy Martinez, who had struggled with guilt and suspicion for decades. Too late for the town of Millbrook, which had never quite recovered from the loss of its golden girl. Sarah's story reminds us that every missing person case is someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone's future stolen away. If you enjoyed this story of mystery and tragedy, let me know in the comments what other unsolved cases or mysterious disappearances you'd like to hear about. And remember, in your own life, trust your instincts. If someone makes you feel uncomfortable, if you feel like you're being followed, don't ignore those feelings. Sarah Chen's story might have ended differently if she'd had someone to turn to when the letters started coming. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply believe someone when they say they're afraid.